Should you trust your assistant with your credit card, bank accounts, passport, and other sensitive documents? So it was October 2014, and I was totally terrified. I was sitting at my desk at my home in Edmonton, Canada, and at that time, I was running a very small marketing firm called Tim Francis Marketing. At that point, there was no great assistant at the company. It was just me and my great assistant running my marketing agency. She was my first ever domestic assistant. She'd been with me for about a year, and it was going very well. In fact, she crushed everything I threw her way. I had delegated to her a ton of lower level stuff already, like uploading blog posts, podcasts, and sending invoices. I'd also delegated to her the next level up, which were kind of medium difficulty tasks, such as preparing version 1 of reports to our marketing clients for me to review, add my comments, and then send out the door. She also was now interacting directly with my clients to help them with whatever they needed, whether it was an invoice or whether it was changing their appointment with me. So the next level of delegation was going to be harder, much more difficult. I would have to really go into some scary places to delegate my email inbox, to hand over my credit card, bank accounts, and passport. Now, just like you, I had a ton of fear. With that kind of access, she could probably defraud me very easily. She could also spend a ton of money and skip the country, and she probably could do it all before I even realized it had happened. So I ended up in a bit of a tricky spot because I did want to get more and more freedom, but it was clear that I was going to have to take a real step here. So I ended up asking myself this one really productive question, which was, what would have to be true for this to go from feeling like I'm jumping the Grand Canyon? How could I shrink that down into what would it take for this to feel like jumping over a pool in someone's backyard? And then after that, what would I have to do to shrink this risk down so that it feels just like kind of stepping over a crack in a sidewalk? Still the chance of stubbing our toe, but if we fall down, we might skin our knee. Nothing mortal, let's say. So in the end, I did choose to hand over my email inbox. I didn't just throw it at her. There was a whole process we followed. I also gave her limited access to my bank account so she could go in, download bank statements to send to our bookkeeper. But she did not have the permissions in my bank account to be able to send transactions. She could set them up, but I had to go in and manually approve them before money could be sent. There's a few other permissions that we adjusted along the way so that I could feel comfortable while giving her as much access that was reasonable, let's say. Now, I'm not saying that you should do what I did. It's a very personal choice, and your business is going to be different than mine. In fact, my own business of today is different than my own business of back then. So I'll share with you 3 helpful things to consider. 1, how do you weigh the trade-offs for freedom? 2, how do you manage risk thoughtfully? And 3, how can you approach this progressively? So the very first thing to know as we think about the trade-offs for freedom is your freedom to hand things off to your assistant and have your assistant take care of things for you is directly capped by how much access your assistant gets. So if you never give your assistant access to a credit card for the company, they will never be able to make those small purchases, and everything's gonna have to run through you. If you don't give your assistant access to your passport, they can't book flights for you and they can't check you in. If you don't give your assistant access to bank accounts, they can't help you with some of the more admin tasks like downloading bank statements and sending them to your bookkeeper. So there's very much a trade-off there. Yes, it's very, very wise to be nervous about the downsides of delegating such sensitive things to your assistant. However, if we're going to be asking what are the downsides, we also have to ask what are the downsides if we don't delegate certain items to our assistant, if we don't give them access to our inbox, our calendar, our credit card, our passport, our bank accounts. So that would be my first question for you is, what trade-offs are you willing to live with? On that spectrum of risk to freedom, they kind of intersect like that. The more risk that you are willing to take on, the more freedom you get, the less risk, the less freedom. And that is a personal choice to know where you fall on that spectrum. The second thing to think about is Again, this question of how do we take this risk feeling like jumping the Grand Canyon, and how do we reduce it down to feeling like just stepping over a sidewalk crack? So for me, there was a collection of about 10 things I did that allowed me to get there. I created a YouTube video on this elsewhere, so I won't go into all the details here, but I'll put the link in the description below. Some of the items I did was I made sure to hire an assistant that was located in the United States or Canada. If there was some major problem with fraud or something scary like that, but my assistant is in the Philippines or India or Pakistan or Venezuela, I don't know how to navigate those systems in those countries. I hear there's a lot of bribery that has to happen, a lot of corruption. I just seriously doubt that I'd be able to actually do anything about it if my assistant turned out to do something illegal. So that was my first way to manage for this risk. Second, while I was hiring my assistant, I had a very, very thorough vetting process, multiple work tests, multiple interviews, multiple psychometric assessments. And before I extended an offer to my assistant, I also did a criminal record check. As I was hiring my assistant, I also had a legal agreement in place that clearly stated the legal relationship between us. Are they an employee or are they a contractor? There was also a non-disclosure agreement in there, right? So now there's that extra added layer of protection that whatever my assistant sees, they can't share it outside of our working relationship. That can be helpful to have that extra legal protection if there's a concern of fraud, right? Another thing I did was I decided that I would really take my time. I did not hand off my email inbox and passport and credit card and all the rest in the first week that my assistant worked for me. I made sure that we could work together. She could get really good at certain tasks, build her competence, and at the same time, I could build my confidence in her. So I highly recommend you watch that other video to see some of the measures I took to build that confidence and feel like I wasn't trying to jump the Grand Canyon, but rather I shrunk it down or was just stepping over a sidewalk crack. Now, the third area that I'll help you with here today is I want you to know that it does not have to be an all or nothing situation. It's not like I'm going to give my assistant full access to all my bank accounts all at once. You don't have to do that. You don't have to give your assistant full access to your full credit cards all at once. Especially within banking, there's a number of different ways that you can be more progressive, like kind of shades of gray in how you hand things off to your assistant. So for example, with your bank accounts, you can very easily, with any major online banking platform in the United States, in Canada, I was with Royal Bank. They had an option for adjusting permissions for staff. At Royal Bank, there's actually a separate website to log on called RBC Express that I signed up for, and I was using that in parallel with the normal RBC. That's what allowed for permissions. In Canada, in the US, any of the major banks, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, any of these big banks, they'll also have permissions that you can kind of toggle on and off. And I've actually found my experience of American banks, the online banking is even more business friendly, let's say. So I adjusted the permissions so that my assistant could, again, set up wires, ACH transfers here in the US or Interact transfers up in Canada when I was running out of there. And at the same time, my assistant does not have the permission to execute any of those transfers, does not have the permission to add any users to the account or edit users or delete users. You don't want anyone to be deleting you off of your account. So adjusting those permissions is usually a really nice progressive step. Furthermore, when it comes to your credit card, something you can do is just give your assistant one of your lower level credit cards. Give them access to something that maybe only has a $5,000 limit instead of your maybe $20,000 or higher dollar limit. Another option, a lot of banks and credit card companies will offer employee cards. So for example, we're with American Express. American Express has the possibility of getting an employee card that has stricter permissions and limits on it than the main, call it parent card, the one that's in my name. So there's all these different banking tools that allow you to decide where you come in. And remember, you can start at a lower level and work your way up over time. I think overall, it's smart to move only as quick as the slowest person. And if that slowest person happens to be you, then don't go any faster than you're comfortable. Also, don't go any faster than you're feeling legally prepared to. There's always the chance, even if it's tiny, that something could happen. Make sure you protect yourself along the way. Seek legal advice where needed. Get accounting advice where needed. And also, one other bonus tip is think not just about your relationship with your assistant, but think also about who are the people around them and what is the environment that they're in. Because your assistant may have the best of intentions, but if for some reason they're traveling a lot and their laptop gets stolen out of their car or out of their RV or something like that, then it doesn't matter how good your assistant's intentions are. They themselves may be victimized themselves, let's just say. Yet again, why I will only work with an assistant in the US or Canada, because I feel way more comfortable with the environment that these two countries provide for me. So those are some thoughts. I don't mean to be somewhat speaking in riddles, if you will. I know oftentimes I prefer to give clear, like, do this, do that, do this, do that guidance. This is just one of those items where it's a lot about your personal comfort, your personal preference, and where you fall on the spectrum of these questions is very much a personal choice. Hope that helped. If you found it to be helpful, be sure to like and subscribe the video. Take care.